Let's bring in Anvar Sarygulov, the head of research at the conservative think tank Bright Blue. Thank you very much for joining us here on LBC News this afternoon. What's your reaction to this U-turn?
Good afternoon, and thank you. Well, I think the U-turn, if you look a bit past politics, and I'll look at the financial side of it, fiscally, the U-turn is really still a drop in the ocean. The mini-budget announced 45 billion worth of tax cuts, many of them welcome and progressive, but the abolition of the 45p rate only removes 2 billion of those cuts. So there's still a big question to be asked about how sustainable this is fiscally. There will need to be either spending cuts or further changes to the tax cuts to make this fiscally sustainable.
And that's just not been set out, has it? The finer detail on this?
No, I don't know. We haven't had the full detail of how this is going to be financed. Now, the government has promised that there will be another fiscal event and an OBR forecast in November, and various spending cuts, including to welfare have been floated. But so far, there is no clarity on how this fiscal sustainability will be achieved.
Of course, we didn't see any forecasts from the watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, when this was all announced 10 days ago. And there is some concern that it may still be November the 23rd before we actually see some numbers from the OBR. Are you concerned at the length of time that we're having to wait?
Yes, I think there is a concern about the wait time, but I think the bigger concern is the risks it poses to the other parts of Liz Truss's agenda. I mean, the growth plan has a lot of regulatory changes which will be laid out, such as allowing onshore wind farms to be built more easier, removing planning restrictions. But if her authority has already been damaged by this, how effectively can the government implement further changes which are likely to be unpopular with many Tory MPs?
Yeah, we are seeing some people saying that there needs to be a general election now because what Liz Truss has been proposing, what Kwasi Kwarteng had been proposing, is very different to what was put to voters at the 2019 general election. Do you agree?
I think it's a very right question to ask. If you think about Boris Johnson's agenda in 2019, it was very much focused on levelling up, bringing prosperity to all corners of the country. And this was a significant part of why he was successful. And we're seeing what it feels at the moment that there has been a shift away from that focus and rhetoric. And I do think there is a question to be asked of whether the current Conservative government is following through on the promises made to people in 2019 and what ushered them into an 80-seat majority at the time.
And we've seen those polls not looking good for the Conservatives at the moment, some huge leads for Labour. Do you think that it is possible that the Conservatives could still win the next election whenever it comes?
I think it's important to recognise that the electorate is really volatile, that voters are much more easier than before switch between parties, and which is why we're seeing quite big polling shifts. But I do think that the Tories now have a very significant uphill battle because, as we've discussed, we seem to have moved away from Boris Johnson's agenda, which won them that majority. And then and for them to have any chance of winning again, I do think there need to be questions asked about how can the Tories retain this winning coalition of voters?
Anvar Sarygulov from the conservative think tank Bright Blue, thank you very much for joining us.